3 years ago, Elias Thorne told her genius was worthless. He took everything, her design, her future, even the life they planned together. Now, the stadium she created is failing. $500 million of steel threatens to collapse. The man who destroyed her career is desperate. The only one who can stop it is the woman he once called worthless. And she's back, stronger than ever, demanding more than his apology, demanding justice. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. James's Family, your own channel for stories of heart, resilience, and hard-won triumph. My beautiful family, I want to speak honestly from my heart. I know that sometimes the truth feels heavy, but we are here to share, to heal, and to grow stronger together. If the stories we tell here resonate with your spirit, and if your heart feels peace here, please show your support. If your heart is true and you believe in second chances, even for yourself, like the video. If your love is real and you are standing firm in your value, write in the comments, "I am with Mr. James." The room smelled like polished wood and legal ink. It was the kind of room where decisions were made quietly, where lives were dismantled without raised voices. The kind of room that pretended neutrality while favoring power. Eliza Vance noticed everything about it the moment she stepped inside. The thickness of the carpet that swallowed sound, the way the windows didn't open, the long table polished so perfectly it reflected faces back in distorted fragments. Elias Thorne stood near the window, instead of sitting down. That too, she noticed. He had always done that when he wanted distance without appearing cruel. Standing gave him height, authority, control. It meant he would speak last. Eliza adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and waited. She had spent 3 nights without sleep preparing for this meeting. 3 nights refining calculations, stress paths, evacuation models. She had come armed with evidence, with logic, with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her work could change how stadiums were built. She still believed, foolishly, that belief would be enough. Elias finally turned toward her. His expression was careful, neutral, polished into something almost gentle. "Eliza," he said, as if greeting her at a dinner party rather than standing on the edge of erasing her. She nodded once. "You asked for revisions. I brought updated simulations." She moved toward the table, reaching for her tablet. He raised a hand. That stopped her. Not the gesture itself, but the timing. The way it came too early. As if the decision had already been made and her presence was merely procedural. "There's no need," he said. The words settled slowly. Like dust. Eliza's fingers stilled in midair. She didn't withdraw her hand immediately. She let it hover there for a second, longer than necessary. Her body waiting for correction, for explanation. "For any of them?" she asked. Elias exhaled. A measured breath. Rehearsed. "I've reviewed the concept in depth," he said. "Extensively." She searched his face for familiarity. For the man who used to argue with her until midnight about load distribution and civic responsibility. For the man who once told her that her mind was the sharpest thing he had ever known. She found none of that. "What specifically concerns you?" she asked. Her voice stayed level. She was proud of that. He walked toward the table, but did not sit. Instead, he rested his palm against its edge, casual, proprietary, as if the room already belonged to him. "The market," he said. "The investors. The optics. The structure exceeds every safety benchmark," Eliza replied. "It's not experimental. It's efficient. That's not the issue." "What is, then?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his eyes shifted, not anger, not doubt, but assessment, as though she were no longer his partner, but a variable that needed elimination. "Your vision," he said slowly, "is too radical for a corporate commission of this scale." The word radical landed wrong. She felt it in her chest. "Radical how?" she asked. Because it prioritizes evacuation time over luxury suites? Because it reduces private boxes to expand public access? Because it challenges what clients expect, he said. And expectations matter. Eliza let out a breath through her nose. Elias, the entire point of, I'm not finished. The words cut cleanly, sharp enough to sting. She fell silent. He straightened, adjusting the cuff of his shirt, a nervous habit he had never been able to break. She wondered, briefly, why she noticed that now, why she still cared. In this industry, he continued, innovation must be palatable. Yours isn't. She felt heat rise in her face, not embarrassment, not anger, but something closer to disbelief. You proposed this project to the committee, she said. You said they were ready for something bold. I said they were open, he corrected. There's a difference. There. The side. Eliza swallowed. Her hands curled slowly into fists at her sides. She forced them to relax. She would not beg. She would not plead. She would speak, clearly, as she always had. The Aura Dome isn't a risk, she said. It's a solution. It addresses crowd flow failures that killed people in older stadiums. It's unmarketable, Elias said. The word dropped between them like a verdict. Unmarketable. Too radical. Too risky. Worthless. He didn't raise his voice when he said it. That was the cruelty of it. He said it as if stating a fact, as if worth could be measured solely by what men like him were comfortable funding. Eliza felt something inside her go very still. Worthless, she repeated softly. Elias didn't flinch. In the current climate, he said. Yes. She stared at him. Really stared. At the man who had watched her sketch the first concept on the back of a napkin at 2 in the morning. At the man who had kissed her forehead and said, "This will change everything." "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I can't afford to be," he replied. That sentence, "I can't afford to be," revealed more than he intended. Her gaze dropped, briefly, to the leather briefcase resting near his chair. She recognized it. Had bought it for him 2 Christmases ago. Italian leather. Minimalist design. She had teased him for choosing something so conventional. She wondered, suddenly, why it was here. Elias cleared his throat. "We'll be moving forward without your involvement. Without your involvement. Not with revisions. Not with compromise. Without." Her heartbeat slowed. Too slow. "And our engagement?" she asked. The question surprised even her. He hesitated. Just a fraction. But she caught it. "I think," he said carefully, "it's best we keep personal matters separate from professional ones." Her mouth curved not into a smile, but into something hollow. "So that's it," she said. "You steal my work and call it professionalism." His head snapped up. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," she replied. Silence thickened the air. Elias stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Eliza, this is about protecting what we've built." Her laugh escaped before she could stop it. Soft. Broken. "What you've built," she corrected. Something hardened in his expression. "You're being emotional," he said. That was when she knew. She nodded slowly. "Once. Then, this conversation is over," she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring. It caught the light as she placed it on the table between them. A small, perfect circle. Heavy. He stared at it. She didn't wait for him to respond. When she turned toward the door, her legs trembled, but she walked anyway. Each step measured, controlled, dignified. She did not look back. The door closed softly behind her. Only then did Elias move. He opened his briefcase. Inside lay a single folder. The Aura Dome. Her design. Her mind. Her future. He slid it free, his jaw tightening. And in that quiet room, with no witnesses left, Elias Thorne chose ambition over love and sealed a lie that would one day collapse under its own weight. As Eliza stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the life she thought she had, Elias uploaded a file under his own name, never realizing the smallest detail he overlooked would one day force her back into his world. Time did what silence always does. It buried the noise without erasing the damage. 3 years passed. 3 years in which Elias Thorne's name climbed steadily upward, polished by press releases and keynote speeches. 3 years in which the Aura Dome became synonymous with ambition. $500 million of steel and promise rising from the ground like a declaration that legacy could be engineered. Elias told himself that was all it was. Engineering. Nothing personal. The day the first structural simulations failed, he was reviewing renderings for the opening ceremony. Fireworks arcs, camera angles. The kind of details reserved for men who believed the hard work was already behind them. His phone vibrated once, then again. By the third call, he felt that faint, unwelcome pressure behind his eyes. Instinct. The kind he had trained himself to ignore. "Put it through," he said. The voice on the other end didn't bother with greetings. "We have a problem." Elias leaned back in his chair, gaze drifting toward the glass wall overlooking his office floor. Everyone looked busy, calm, unaware. "What kind of problem?" he asked. A pause. Too long. The core arch. His fingers stilled. "The latest load simulations don't reconcile," the engineer continued. "We ran them 3 times. And the margin isn't narrowing." Elias straightened. "Send me everything," he said. "Now." Minutes later, the conference room filled not with chatter, but with the sharp, brittle silence of professionals who knew better than to panic out loud. Screens glowed with data, lines intersected where they shouldn't, stress vectors bent at angles that defied logic. The Aura Dome stood solid on sight, but on the screen, it was already breaking. Elias stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes moving from face to face. "Explain," he said. A junior analyst cleared his throat. "The stress accumulation at the central arch doesn't distribute as predicted." "That's impossible," someone else said. "We've reinforced it twice." "Yes," the analyst replied, "but reinforcement isn't resolving the contradiction." Elias frowned. "Contradiction? The load paths are obeying the math," the analyst said carefully. "They're just arguing with the concept." That word again, concept. Elias felt a flicker of irritation. "Be precise." A senior engineer leaned forward. "It's not a materials failure, it's not execution. The problem is upstream." "How far upstream?" Elias asked. No one answered immediately. Then someone spoke from the far end of the table, quiet, older, unimpressed by titles. "The flaw is in the original logic." The room shifted. Elias turned slowly. "Explain what you mean by that." The man didn't flinch. The arch was designed to behave as if human movement was a stabilizing factor. "That's unconventional." Elias's jaw tightened. "Unconventional doesn't mean wrong." "No," the man agreed. "But it does mean specific." The screens changed. A new overlay appeared, crowd flow simulations layered over structural stress. The numbers climbed, then spiked. Silence pressed in. "If occupancy exceeds predicted behavior," the man continued, "the structure doesn't fail immediately. It destabilizes gradually. A slow death." Elias felt heat creep up his spine. "So adjust the predictions." "We did. And the model refuses to comply." That was when it happened. A sentence delivered without accusation, without drama. "The original structural logic doesn't belong to us." The words cut through the room. Elias felt them land not on the table, but inside his chest. "What are you implying?" he asked. The man met his gaze. That whoever conceived this system designed it around principles we didn't originate. We've been modifying something we don't fully understand. The room stayed quiet. Partners exchanged looks. Calculations refreshed. No one contradicted him. Elias looked back at the screen, at the arch, at the invisible assumptions embedded deep within it. He felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "How much time do we have?" he asked. Another pause. "Before what?" someone asked. "Before this becomes public," Elias replied. The answer came softly. "Not much." Construction halted within the hour. Cranes froze mid-air. Workers were sent home with vague reassurances. Press statements spoke of routine safety verification. The market believed them for now. Elias didn't. He stayed late, long after the building emptied, alone with the data, with the models that refused to obey him. He pulled up the oldest file. The first version, the one he told himself he had improved. His cursor hovered. For a moment, he considered not opening it. Then, he did. The structure bloomed onto the screen not as a thing of steel, but as an idea. Elegant, purpose-driven, human-centered in ways the later revisions weren't. He scrolled, and there it was. The logic he had never fully rewritten. The assumptions he had kept because they worked without understanding why. His breath slowed. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. 3 years. 3 years of convincing himself that credit mattered more than comprehension, that he could own a thing without honoring its source. His phone buzzed. A message from a partner. "We need a solution." Fast. Elias closed his eyes. He knew the answer. He just didn't know if he could survive it. Elias opened his contacts, thumb hovering over a name he had erased years ago, knowing that to save his legacy, he would have to summon the very mind he once declared worthless. The call went unanswered for 2 days. Elias expected that. He left a message the first time carefully neutral, stripped of apology. The second time, he said nothing at all. By the third attempt, he stopped calling and sent the request through official channels, hiding behind process and paperwork the way he always had. When the confirmation came, it wasn't from her. It was from a firm he barely recognized, a smaller name. Quiet reputation, ethical projects, the kind of company that didn't chase headlines. The email was brief. "Engineer Eliza Vance will attend the site inspection. Monday, 8 a.m. No greeting. No acknowledgement of history. Elias read it twice. Then he stared at the timestamp until the numbers blurred. Monday arrived without ceremony. The construction site was already awake, machines idling, supervisors barking orders, steel rising against a pale sky. Elias stood near the temporary command office, surrounded by men who waited for his cue, his reassurance, his authority. None of it steadied him. A black SUV rolled through the gates without stopping for direction. It parked where visitors weren't supposed to park. The door opened. Eliza stepped out. Helmet tucked under one arm, boots hitting the gravel with practiced ease. A tailored jacket over a high-visibility vest, functional, not performative. Her hair pulled back, face bare, expression unreadable. She did not scan the site in awe. She assessed it. Elias felt something tighten in his chest, not shock, not longing, but a sharp awareness of presence. As if the space itself had shifted to accommodate her. She didn't look for him. She walked straight toward the exposed arch, eyes already tracing stress points, fingers brushing the tablet in her hand. "Morning," someone said, uncertain. She nodded once. "Where are your latest load readings?" A supervisor scrambled. We have them inside." "I'll take them here," she said. "The structure behaves differently when you're standing under it." Her voice carried. Calm, controlled, not loud but impossible to ignore. Elias took a step forward. "Elisa." She didn't turn. She crouched instead, pressing her palm against the concrete base as if listening through it. "You reinforced the wrong segment," she said. The words sliced clean. One of the engineers frowned. "We followed. You followed intuition," she replied. "Not logic." She stood, finally turning her gaze, passing over Elias without stopping, landing instead on the faces behind him. "This arch doesn't fail under weight," she continued. "It fails under movement. You treated it like a static monument." Her eyes flicked to the structure. It was never meant to be one. Silence rippled outward. Elias felt it then, not humiliation, not fear, but displacement. The sense of being demoted without ceremony. Dr. Kai Chen stepped forward. He had arrived quietly, unnoticed, the way he preferred. His hair was grayer now, his posture unchanged. He watched Eliza with something close to pride. "You're Engineer Vance," he said. She nodded. "Dr. Chen, you've reviewed the data?" he asked. "On the flight," she replied. "And again on the drive, here." "How long will it take you to diagnose the flaw?" he asked. She considered the arch, the wind, the faint vibration beneath her boots. "I already have," she said. A murmur spread through the group. Elias stepped closer despite himself. "Then, you know the scale of what we're dealing with." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were steady. Not cold, not warm, just clear. "I know the scale of what you built on top of it," she said. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. Dr. Chen inhaled slowly. "We should move this discussion somewhere private." Eliza shook her head. "No." The refusal landed harder than a raised voice ever could. "If I'm taking responsibility for this structure," she continued, "I won't do it behind glass." She turned to Elias. "Before we proceed," she said, "we establish terms." His jaw tightened. "This isn't a negotiation." "It is," she replied. "You just don't like your position in it." A beat. "First," she said, "all interaction between us remains technical. You don't reference the past. You don't explain yourself. You don't apologize. If you do, I leave." Elias swallowed. "Agreed." "Second," she continued, "I have final authority over structural decisions. No overrides. No committees." One of the partners protested. "That's..." She raised a hand. They stopped. "I'm not here to collaborate," she said. "I'm here to correct." Dr. Chen studied her. "And the fee?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a single document. Not a contract, something else. She handed it to Elias. He scanned the page. A foundation charter. Her name at the top. Funding allocation. Scholarships. Mentorship programs. Public reporting. His brow furrowed. "This isn't my compensation," she said. "Isn't personal." He looked up. "Your firm will cede a percentage of final profits," she continued, "to this foundation. In writing. Publicly disclosed." The room held its breath. Elias stared at the document. "You don't want the money," he said slowly. "I want acknowledgement," she replied. "Permanent. Structural. Impossible to erase." Dr. Chen's gaze flicked between them. Elias felt something give way inside him. He nodded. "Done," he said. Eliza took the document back. "Good," she replied. "Then let's begin." She turned toward the arch, already issuing instructions. And Elias Thorne, once the unquestioned authority, followed. As Eliza adjusted her helmet and stepped beneath the arch, Elias realized the structure was no longer the only thing under stress, because for the first time, the power he stole was standing directly in front of him. The wind whipped across the unfinished upper deck, cold and sharp enough to cut through the layers of clothing. Steel beams rattled faintly under the strain of cranes, a metallic whisper reminding everyone below that this structure was alive, breathing, and dangerous. Every footfall on the grated surface sang the song of mortality. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and someone could plummet hundreds of feet into concrete. Eliza moved like she had done this 1,000 times before, though this was only her first time back here in years. Helmet tight, tablet clutched, her eyes sweeping over the construction site as if scanning invisible threads, connecting every support, every girder. She didn't look at Elias, not at first. She looked at the building, and in her gaze, the arch seemed to lean toward her approval, trembling slightly at her assessment. Elias followed. Behind her, silent, his usual air of control stripped away, his authority meaningless under her presence. He barked no orders, made no corrections. He watched, and for the first time he felt the pang of irrelevance, of being a spectator to a genius he had once tried to erase. "Load distribution along the secondary supports is off by 6%, she said without looking up, fingers sliding across her tablet. "You reinforced the wrong nodes." Elias inhaled, chest tightening. He wanted to argue, he wanted to assert himself, but he didn't, he couldn't. Every instinct, every lecture he had ever given, every command he had barked into conference rooms felt hollow now. She was right. Of course she was right. And he knew it. "Correct it," he said finally. His voice, quiet and low, carried only the authority of someone begging to be taught. She glanced at him once, sharp and precise, and then returned to the task. Her hands moved over the tablet, sliding data, adjusting vectors. Every movement was confident, exact, instinctive. She didn't need the simulations to tell her what the problem was. She knew. The building's pulse whispered the truth in ways that numbers could not. Eliza crouched to inspect a joint, leaning close to the steel beam. Fingers traced invisible lines. Her eyes scanned stress points as if reading the heartbeat of the structure. Elias watched, shivering, not from the height, not from the wind, but from recognition. That instinct, that connection, that ownership. He remembered the nights she had sketched concepts on napkins, coffee rings as her only guide, drawing details no one else could see, and he realized he had destroyed more than her career. He had destroyed the world she was quietly saving. "Your main arch isn't failing under static load," she said, looking up briefly. "It fails under movement. Crowd-induced oscillations, human behavior. You didn't account for it." Elias clenched his jaw. He had thought of every conceivable risk, every calculation, every committee-approved adjustment, every consultant's opinion. He had considered them all. But he hadn't thought like her. He hadn't thought about humans, not the ones who would fill these seats, who would run for exits, who would stumble under panic. Not about what their lives meant beyond numbers and prestige. "You designed it to protect people," he said quietly, almost to himself. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The affirmation wasn't for him. It was for the building, and for the people who would one day stand beneath its arches. The wind shifted, snapping a sheet of steel loose nearby. A junior engineer froze mid-step. Eliza didn't flinch. She barked a command, her voice slicing through the roar of machinery and wind. "Secure the load. Adjust the tension on the east beam. Step back." The engineer obeyed. The steel held. No one fell. Elias exhaled, relief and shame tangled together. He had spent 3 years thinking he had succeeded, thinking he had created a masterpiece, thinking he could rewrite genius with ambition and charm. And now he realized the unbearable truth. The only reason this structure had any chance of surviving at all was because she had created it with human life as the center, not profit. She stood back, surveying the modifications she had made in seconds, and finally her gaze landed on him. "Do you understand now?" she asked, calm, lethal, precise. Elias swallowed. The taste in his mouth was bitter. "Yes." "No," she said, stepping closer. I don't mean that in words you can speak. I mean, do you feel it? He looked away, eyes tracing the arch, the beams, the scaffolding. His stomach knotted. The moral cost of his theft pressed down harder than any failure on paper. He had taken her work, claimed it, decorated it with his name. But that wasn't just a professional crime. It was a human one. He had disregarded safety, intuition, life itself, because he valued recognition over reason. For the first time, Elias realized that genius isn't measured by applause or contracts. It is measured by consequence. And the consequence of his theft now stretched beneath his feet in steel, wind, and the faint hum of cranes. Eliza's tablet beeped. She scanned the screen. The main reinforcement here is insufficient. If left as is, the arch will experience micro-fractures under maximum capacity. Elias's stomach dropped. Micro-fractures. They multiply, she said, exponentially. By the time anyone notices, it will be too late. He swallowed hard. He had spent 3 years convincing himself numbers were everything. That control mattered more than correctness. That recognition was worth more than responsibility. Now he felt the weight of the lives his ambition had endangered. "Then fix it," he said, almost desperately. "I am," she replied. Her tone betrayed no urgency, no fear, only certainty. He watched as she coordinated adjustments, giving commands to crane operators, welders, and engineers alike. Every instruction she issued was precise, deliberate. Every calculation she made accounted for life first, profit second. And Elias felt it like a punch to the chest. He had never thought about life first, not once. The building groaned as if responding to her touch. The vibrations traveled through the steel deck and into his bones. He realized she didn't just understand structures. She understood trust, responsibility, consequence, the invisible web connecting a building to the lives inside it. She had built not only with her mind, but with her conscience. "And the foundation?" he asked quietly. "It's stable," she replied, "but it's reinforced unevenly. Redistribution needed immediately." He nodded. "I'll do what you need." "You won't touch it," she said. "I handle the decisions. You follow." The word struck him harder than any failure report ever could. For 3 years, he had been the architect of appearances. For 3 years, he had believed his authority was enough. Now, for 3 years, he had been wrong, and the proof stood before him, unyielding, unbroken, indispensable. Elias followed her instructions without question. Every movement he made was silent. Every calculation he had previously trusted, he now doubted. Every instinct he once believed infallible now paled before her certainty. At one point, a crane swayed too close to the upper scaffold. Eliza barked a command, precise and commanding, and the operator corrected instantly. Elias watched, frozen, realizing that in an instant she had prevented disaster, not with law or procedure, but with intuition. The air grew tense, wind shifted, the upper beams creaked, yet she moved with them as though she owned the air around her. And Elias understood something unbearable. She had designed not just the stadium, but the lives that would inhabit it. He swallowed hard. Every breath carried guilt, every glance carried awe. He had never seen dedication like this, not in partners, not in colleagues, not in himself. And he knew, with a cold certainty, that the moral cost of stealing her genius was far higher than he had ever imagined. As Eliza traced the main support arch with her hands, Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, because in that instant he realized the structure was no longer the only thing she was testing. She was testing him. The hum of machinery and the low whistle of wind carried over the upper decks of the Aura Dome, but one sound broke through them all, a sharp, confident click of heels on steel. Sarah Jenkins appeared at the edge of the site, impossibly poised, every detail calculated, white stilettos, a fitted cream blouse, a designer bag that probably cost more than a week of construction wages. The cameras mounted on her phone clattered with every step, her smile wide and rehearsed, a public signal to anyone watching that everything was fine, that she controlled the narrative. Eliza froze for a fraction of a second, helmet still in hand, eyes narrowing. Sarah was the kind of presence that demanded attention without earning it, and yet it was precisely that presence that had once secured the stadium commission for Elias, the connections, the charm, the illusion of propriety. She didn't even glance at the scaffolding or the exposed arch. She didn't care about the numbers, the calculations, the lives that might someday fill this building. Her eyes were fixed on Elias. Clinging to his arm, she whispered something meant to be private, but the words carried across the open air. "Everything's going to be fine, right? You've got this, love." Elias felt the weight of her hand on his arm, the soft press of expectation. But he didn't respond. He didn't smile, didn't reassure. He had nothing to offer her. Not anymore. Not in this moment. Eliza noticed the panic flicker in Sarah's expression before it was masked by the polished facade. A flicker she thought only she could see. The shallow confidence was crumbling, revealing the woman who had never built anything herself, who had always relied on appearances and alliances to maintain security. Sarah stepped closer, now fully in Elias's space, still smiling at the camera she held in the other hand. "Everyone's watching," she said, tone slightly higher, fragile. "We can't let them see, chaos." Elias didn't answer. His jaw tightened, not because of fear, not because of nerves, but because for the first time the truth was more important than appearances. The building's survival depended on honesty, not charm, integrity, not illusion. And that truth pointed straight at Eliza. Sarah began, but her words faltered as Elias finally looked at her, really looked. "Sarah," he said, firm but controlled. "Step back." She blinked. "Step back? What do you mean?" "I mean you're in the way," he said. "You're in the way of the work. Step back." Her hands trembled slightly. She laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was a shield. "You can't. People are watching. You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted, voice louder now, the authority he had always wielded, redirected toward truth instead of appearances. "Because this isn't about what people—" He had never thought about life first. Not once. The building groaned as if responding to her touch. The vibrations traveled through the steel deck and into his bones. He realized she didn't just understand structures. She understood trust, responsibility, consequence, the invisible web connecting a building to the lives inside it. She had built not only with her mind, but with her conscience. "And the foundation?" he asked quietly. "It's stable," she replied, "but it's reinforced unevenly. Redistribution needed immediately." He nodded. "I'll do what you need." "You won't touch it," she said. "I handle the decisions. You follow." The word struck him harder than any failure report ever could. For 3 years, he had been the architect of appearances. For 3 years, he had believed his authority was enough. Now, for 3 years, he had been wrong, and the proof stood before him, unyielding, unbroken, indispensable. Elias followed her instructions without question. Every movement he made was silent. Every calculation he had previously trusted he now doubted. Every instinct he once believed infallible now paled before her certainty. At one point, a crane swayed too close to the upper scaffold. Eliza barked a command, precise and commanding, and the operator corrected instantly. Elias watched, frozen, realizing that in an instant she had prevented disaster, not with law or procedure, but with intuition. The air grew tense, wind shifted, the upper beams creaked, yet she moved with them as though she owned the air around her. And Elias understood something unbearable. She had designed not just the stadium, but the lives that would inhabit it. He swallowed hard. Every breath carried guilt. Every glance carried awe. He had never seen dedication like this. not in partners, not in colleagues, not in himself. And he knew, with a cold certainty, that the moral cost of stealing her genius was far higher than he had ever imagined. As Eliza traced the main support arch with her hands, Elias felt a shiver run down his spine, because in that instant he realized the structure was no longer the only thing she was testing. She was testing him. The hum of machinery and the low whistle of wind carried over the upper decks of the Aura Dome, but one sound broke through them all, a sharp, confident click of heels on steel. Sarah Jenkins appeared at the edge of the site, impossibly poised, every detail calculated: white stilettos, a fitted cream blouse, a designer bag that probably cost more than a week of construction wages. The cameras mounted on her phone clattered with every step, her smile wide and rehearsed, a public signal to anyone watching that everything was fine, that she controlled the narrative. Eliza froze for a fraction of a second, helmet still in hand, eyes narrowing. Sarah was the kind of presence that demanded attention without earning it, and yet it was precisely that presence that had once secured the stadium commission for Elias, the connections, the charm, the illusion of propriety. She didn't even glance at the scaffolding or the exposed arch. She didn't care about the numbers, the calculations, the lives that might someday fill this building. Her eyes were fixed on Elias. Clinging to his arm, she whispered something meant to be private, but the words carried across the open air. "Everything's going to be fine, right? You've got this, love." Elias felt the weight of her hand on his arm, the soft press of expectation. But he didn't respond. He didn't smile, didn't reassure. He had nothing to offer her, not anymore, not in this moment. Eliza noticed the panic flicker in Sarah's expression before it was masked by the polished facade, a flicker she thought only she could see. The shallow confidence was crumbling, revealing the woman who had never built anything herself, who had always relied on appearances and alliances to maintain security. Sarah stepped closer, now fully in Elias's space, still smiling at the camera she held in the other hand. "Everyone's watching," she said, tone slightly higher, fragile. "We can't let them see, chaos." Elias didn't answer. His jaw tightened, not because of fear, not because of nerves, but because for the first time the truth was more important than appearances. The building's survival depended on honesty, not charm, integrity, not illusion. And that truth pointed straight at Eliza. Sarah began, but her words faltered as Elias finally looked at her, really looked. "Sarah," he said, firm but controlled. "Step back." She blinked. "Step back? What do you mean?" "I mean you're in the way," he said. "You're in the way of the work. Step back." Her hands trembled slightly. She laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was a shield. "You can't. People are watching. You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted, voice louder now, the authority he had always wielded, redirected toward truth instead of appearances. "Because this isn't about what people see. This is about what holds together and what doesn't. Right now, that means listening to Engineer Vance and letting her do her job." The words hit like a shockwave. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of panic overtaking the rehearsed composure. The camera slipped slightly in her grip. The heels that had clicked so confidently now felt heavy. She looked at the steel beams, the scaffolding, the engineers moving under Eliza's precise commands, and then back at Elias. Elias didn't flinch. He couldn't. The responsibility was heavier than any social expectation. He was no longer choosing comfort or safety. He was choosing the truth. Eliza, observing the exchange quietly, didn't need to speak. The shift in the air was clear. The dynamic had changed. The woman who had secured Elias's career through charm and alliances was suddenly powerless against competence and consequence. "You're shaking," Elias said softly, almost pitying. But there was no warmth in his voice, only observation. Sarah forced a laugh. I'm fine," she said, but the words were brittle. They fractured immediately in the wind, carrying faintly across the sight. Dr. Kai Chen stepped closer to Elias, voice low. "She's never built anything herself," he murmured. "She doesn't understand why this matters, the structure, the lives. She doesn't grasp it." Elias nodded minutely. "I know," he said. And for the first time in years, he felt an unfamiliar liberation. The choice had been made, not by committees, not by public expectation, not by fear, by truth. Sarah's panic grew as she realized Elias would not reassure her. That the world she had built around him, her marriage, the public image, the projected stability, was beginning to crumble in real time in front of everyone on that site. The shallow assurances, the calculated smiles, the camera-ready poses, none of it could compete with the reality that Eliza had returned and commanded authority he could no longer claim for himself. She glanced at Eliza, helmet tight, eyes scanning beams, hands issuing commands, voice calm but precise. Sarah's lips parted, trying to form some retort, some attempt to reclaim control. But the words dissolved before they left her mouth. Elias stepped slightly between them, not to shield, not to protect, but to assert a new hierarchy, truth over appearances, safety over comfort, life over pretense. The subtle tremor in the steel beneath their feet seemed almost to echo the shift. The marriage that had once cemented his power now showed cracks in plain view, visible to anyone who cared to see. Sarah had been a symbol of success. Now she was a symbol of fragility, exposed by competence, ethics, and moral clarity. Elias didn't look at her again. Not now. Not while she still clung to his arm like a lifeline. Instead, he followed Eliza across the beams, every step deliberate, silent, attentive. Every instruction she gave, he executed without hesitation. He felt the weight of each decision, each pause, each correction. Every action became an acknowledgement of the cost of his earlier choices, and with every movement he realized that the public facade he had relied on for years was meaningless here, worthless even. Sarah's face paled as she watched him, her carefully constructed confidence unraveling. The cameras she had brought were useless here. No one would see the truth the way she had planned. And Elias, standing tall yet humbled, made no attempt to comfort her. He had no reason to. She had never built. She had never saved anyone. Eliza, still issuing commands, barely glanced at them. The focus was entirely on the structure, on the lives it would contain, on the instinctive knowledge embedded in every joint, every beam, every calculated risk. Elias understood it now. The moral cost of his theft extended far beyond financial gain or professional recognition. It reached into the heart of every life he had underestimated, every human consequence he had ignored. And in this moment, he began to grasp the depth of responsibility she had carried silently all along. Sarah stumbled slightly, caught off guard by her own helplessness. She looked at Elias again, trying to find some sign of solidarity, some hint that the world had not yet turned against her. But his eyes were fixed on Eliza and the structure. The choice had been made. Truth had precedence over pretense. The wind gusted. A loose cable swung perilously close to the scaffolding. Eliza barked a command, sharp and exact. The workers obeyed instantly. Sarah's hands clenched the edge of the railing. She realized bitterly that she had no control, not here, not now, not over the man she had thought she could claim forever. Elias exhaled slowly, silently accepting the shift. For 3 years he had measured success by the illusion of security. For 3 years he had valued appearance over integrity. Now, watching the woman he once married unravel in the presence of true authority, he understood the cost. Sarah's smile faltered entirely. The cameras had been turned on by choice, yet she had no audience capable of saving her. The power that had been hers to wield through connection, manipulation, and comfort was gone. And Elias, following every precise movement of Eliza, felt a clarity he had never known before. He didn't comfort, He didn't retreat. He didn't flinch. He chose truth. And Sarah realized she could not follow. As a crane shifted overhead, the wind catching the suspended steel, Sarah's heels slipped slightly on the edge, and Elias's gaze flicked, not toward her, but to the faint movement in the shadow beneath the arch that neither of them had expected. The construction site had emptied hours ago. The cranes rested like sentinels in the dark, skeletal arms stretched against a navy sky. Only the hum of the night wind and the faint echo of cooling steel marked the end of the day. Eliza stayed behind, helmet tucked beneath her arm, tablet glowing with the pale light of urgent calculations. Her gloves were off now, fingers brushing the screen with care. She had already walked every beam, inspected every joint, and issued all instructions for the night crew. Nothing more to correct, nothing more to fix, everything in motion. And yet she couldn't leave, not until she had seen it. She opened the digital file she had avoided for 3 years, the one she had once considered a tombstone of her career, the one Elias had taken and submitted as his own. The layers of numbers, angles, and curves scrolled across her screen, meticulous, precise, undeniably brilliant, and yet, hidden beneath all the technical data, she found something new. An encrypted note buried deep in the metadata. Her breath caught. It was small, personal, easily overlooked unless you knew what to look for. She hesitated, fingers hovering, heart thrumming. The message revealed itself, a wedding date, written in the quiet font of someone who had imagined a shared future. A promise unspoken to the world, tucked between lines of calculations and revisions. Love expressed in a way only she could understand. Eliza's hands trembled slightly for the first time since the betrayal. She had expected cruelty, indifference, vindication. She had expected a monster. Instead, she found a man who had loved her, and yet loved her enough to steal from her, loved her enough to destroy her career for ambition, loved her enough to sacrifice integrity at the altar of his success. A wave of emotions hit her all at once: rage, disbelief, grief, longing. Her teeth clenched, her chest felt tight, as though the air itself had been stolen. She read the note again, and again. Each time, a deeper fracture opened inside her. This wasn't simply betrayal. It wasn't merely theft or professional sabotage. It was intimate, personal, a violation of trust wrapped in the guise of love. And yet, she felt it, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, the echo of affection, the pull of what might have been. Eliza's hatred, the one she had carefully nurtured like armor for 3 years, began to fracture. The edges crumbled where curiosity and a hint of sorrow seeped in. She realized that human emotion was never simple, never linear. Love and rage could coexist. Ambition and morality could collide. Pain could carry a whisper of tenderness. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to steady herself, to push the fluttering heartbeats back into reason. But the realization persisted. Elias had loved her. He had imagined a future with her. And yet, he had chosen the path that almost destroyed her. The complexity of it unsettled her more than any legal or professional battle ever could. She had arrived on this site prepared to command, to control, to restore the Aura Dome and reclaim what was rightfully hers. She had not prepared for this. She had not prepared to see him, not merely as a thief, but as a man capable of deep, flawed affection. Her fingers hovered over the delete option for the note. She wanted to erase it, to destroy the proof that he had ever cared, to maintain the clarity of her moral high ground. But she couldn't. Something inside her resisted. The knowledge was part of the structure now, embedded like stress points in steel. She realized then that her resolve, her carefully constructed plan for vengeance and reclamation, was no longer absolute. It had cracks, fissures through which uncertainty and reflection began to seep. And for the first time since the betrayal, she wondered how much of the man she had despised was lost forever, and how much could still exist beneath the mask of arrogance and theft. Her mind replayed every interaction she had endured since returning to the site. Every command, every silent glance, every moment Elias had followed her without protest. Had he always been hiding this? Or had she just never been willing to see it? The tablet vibrated slightly, as if echoing the tremor in her chest. She put a hand on it to steady the device and to steady herself. The storm inside her mind grew, a silent whirlwind. Hate and pity, fury and curiosity, all colliding. She had never believed she could feel anything other than contempt for him. Yet here it was, complicated, undeniable, and terrifying. The night deepened around her. The steel beams gleamed under the sight lights, shadows shifting like living things. Somewhere in the distance a crane groaned as it cooled, a reminder of the very danger that surrounded them. Yet she stayed. She stayed because the note demanded consideration, because the truth, painful, imperfect, human, refused to be ignored. And in that quiet, suspended moment, she realized the stakes had changed. The problem was no longer only structural. The problem now involved trust, emotion, and the unbearable weight of knowing that love and betrayal could coexist in the same mind, the same hands that had once destroyed her. Eliza exhaled slowly, feeling the night air fill her lungs as if drawing clarity from the shadows. Her fingers hovered over the tablet again. Should she confront him with this knowledge? Should she weaponize it or bury it? Before she could decide, a soft chime echoed through the empty construction office. Not from her tablet, from Elias's phone, a single message notification. Her heart jumped. It was from him. The text read only 3 words. "We need to talk." Eliza's hands froze. The screen glowed in the dark like a pulse she could not ignore. For a long moment she did nothing. The air felt impossibly still. The steel around her seemed to hold its breath with her. She realized that the confrontation she had always prepared for, the technical, professional clash, was now only part of the storm. There was something personal here, something dangerous, and she was unarmed against it. She looked up at the arch above, the work she had already begun, and then back at the glowing tablet. 3 years of rage, ambition, and reclamation now collided with something she hadn't accounted for. The undeniable fact that the man who betrayed her had also loved her. And that knowledge unsettled her more than any structural flaw ever could. Eliza's fingers trembled as she stared at the message. Her resolve fractured, her chest tightened, and for the first time since she returned, she wondered if confronting Elias meant not just reclaiming her work, but risking her heart. The site had been quiet hours ago. Shadows stretched across the girders, and the faint hum of machinery marked the night's labor. Yet even in that calm, tension simmered. A single misstep, a single miscalculation, and catastrophe could strike. Then it happened. A massive steel component, part of the main arch, sheared mid-lift. The sound was horrifying. A metallic crack, sharp and unforgiving, echoed across the site like a gunshot. Sparks danced where friction met steel, and the air seemed to explode with the sound of machinery groaning under sudden stress. Screams tore through the night. Workers froze, some gripping safety rails, others scrambling to avoid the swinging girder. Fear painted their faces in stark relief against the glow of floodlights. Elias's stomach dropped. He had always imagined crises in reports and simulations. He had never imagined them in real life, never like this. Eliza reacted instantly, not hesitation, not panic. Her voice sliced through the chaos, precise and commanding. "Secure the east cable, all personnel, clear the swing radius, crane operator, counterbalance now, reinforce secondary supports, immediately." Each instruction was sharp, each order executed without question. The workers moved as one, guided by her instincts, her calculations, her authority. Elias could barely breathe. He could only watch. A young engineer stumbled, lost in the panic, and she barked his name, directing him with surgical precision to a safe zone. Another worker slipped near the platform edge, and Eliza's sharp command redirected his steps just in time. The component finally stabilized, swaying slightly but ultimately restrained by the secondary cables she had recalculated mid-flight. The immediate danger passed, though adrenaline and fear still vibrated through every nerve on site. Eliza turned, face set in calm determination, eyes scanning the aftermath. Not a single worker injured, not one life lost. Elias stood rooted to the spot, stomach tight, heart pounding. The word worthless, the same word he had used against her 3 years ago, echoed in his mind, sharp and bitter. He had called her worthless, and now he realized the full weight of it, not abstract anymore, not numbers on a blueprint, not some imagined failure he could blame on circumstance. Real lives, real risk, real lives saved by the woman he had cast aside. That night, he could not sleep. The penthouse above the city offered no comfort, no refuge. The lights of the skyline glared like a reminder of all he had lost. Sarah had retreated to her chambers, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The offices, the contracts, the power, they all felt meaningless now. The building's survival depended on Eliza, not him. His self-preservation instinct, honed over decades, collided with moral reckoning in the darkest corner of his mind. He replayed every interaction from that night, every command she had issued, every life saved, every instinct he had ignored. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. "Mr. Thorne?" a voice called. Calm, but heavy with authority. He opened the door to find the board of partners waiting. Men and women who had once deferred to his expertise without question, now carrying the weight of the structural crisis on their shoulders. "You've called us," one said. "We need an update." Elias swallowed hard. The truth sat heavily on his tongue. He could lie, he could protect himself, deflect blame, hide the theft. That would preserve his reputation, his career, his firm. But he couldn't, not tonight, not after seeing her work, not after knowing what she had done to save lives. "The main arch experienced a catastrophic shear," he began, voice low. "But Engineer Vance acted immediately. She prevented a disaster. She corrected structural loads in real time, saving all personnel on site." The board exchanged glances, murmurs rising. "She did it alone?" one asked, incredulous. "Yes," Elias replied. "Every calculation, every adjustment, every decision. She acted on her own authority, and the structure survived because of her." Silence followed. Not the polite silence of the boardroom, not the deferential silence of colleagues. This was disbelief mixed with awe. Elias felt the moral weight pressing against him. He could have taken credit. He could have minimized her role. He could have spun the narrative to protect himself, but he didn't. Because this wasn't about him anymore, because this was about the truth, because this was about her. And the truth, raw, uncompromising, human, was undeniable. He saw their faces shift, realization dawning. The legacy he had tried to build on her work, the reputation he had tried to claim, now stood illuminated by her competence. Not his. He swallowed hard. Pride, ambition, and self-preservation all collided in one instant of clarity. He had choices to make. He could hide, or he could face it, protect himself, or accept responsibility for the years of theft, arrogance, and negligence. And he knew what he had to do. The board was waiting, silent, expectant, eyes on him. Elias exhaled slowly, the weight of his decisions pressing into his spine like steel beams overhead. He realized, painfully, that this moment would define him far more than any contract, any award, any public acclaim. The moral cost of his theft had arrived, and for the first time he understood the true meaning of responsibility. Outside, The wind whispered against the steel. Somewhere above, a crane groaned faintly. The shadows of the incomplete structure stretched like fingers across the night. Eliza had survived the steel. The structure had survived the shear. But Elias knew something deeper was at stake now. It was not the building that needed saving. It was him. As the board waited for his declaration, Elias's phone buzzed quietly in his pocket. A single notification, not from a partner, not from a colleague. It was from Eliza. 3 words glowed on the screen. Meet me alone. The boardroom was colder than Elias expected. Not physically, it was a bright, climate-controlled office, but emotionally. The air between polished oak and glass was thick with fear, greed, and uncertainty. He could almost taste it. Each partner leaned forward in their chairs, eyes sharp, waiting for the words that would decide the fate of $500 million and the reputation of Thorne and Company. Eliza had presented her solution earlier in precise technical detail. Every calculation cross-referenced, every load path recalculated, every risk itemized and quantified. The fix was audacious. A full stress test of the main arch, every component reinforced according to her unconventional design, every section recalculated for human safety margins she had instinctively integrated years before. It was brilliant, and it could ruin him. The board had reacted exactly as he anticipated, cold, dismissive, incredulous. "This is reckless," one partner said, tone sharp. "You're asking us to risk the entire firm, $500 million, for what? Pride?" "Not pride," Elias interrupted, voice low, deliberate. "Survival, of the structure, of the workers, of the truth." Another partner, more senior, shook his head. "And your liability, if it fails? Who bears it? Certainly not Engineer Vance." Elias's fingers clenched against the table. "I will." The room went silent. Every pair of eyes now focused on him. Whispers ceased. The unspoken question hung, has he lost his mind? Elias could feel the moral calculus of his life tightening like steel cables under load. For years he had chosen appearances, alliances, and profit over integrity. Now the moment of truth demanded a different currency, sacrifice. He took a breath, tasting the metallic tang of fear in his mouth. The partners shifted uneasily in their seats. He could see the calculation running in their minds, risk versus reward, reputation versus liability, public perception versus private survival. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of responsibility settle fully upon him. Not the veneer of authority, not the polished facade that had carried him for years. Real responsibility. Full, undeniable, unmitigated responsibility. "I will authorize the stress test," he said, voice steady. "I take full personal liability for every decision and outcome of this fix. If it fails, it is my failure. Not hers, not the firm's, mine." The room erupted, quietly at first, then louder, with objections, questions, demands. Partners shouted over one another. Some argued that his decision was financial suicide. Others insisted it was madness. Elias did not flinch. He had already seen the alternative: lives lost, a structure failing, the truth buried under a mountain of lies. That was a price he would never pay. From the doorway, Sarah watched. White heels against the dark, polished floor, her hand gripping the edge of the door frame like a lifeline. She had followed him here, hoping to influence him, to pull him back into the safety of appearances. But she found herself paralyzed, powerless in the presence of a choice she had never been capable of making herself. Elias noticed her hesitation. Her eyes widened as she realized the magnitude of his decision. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't reassurance. This was the first time in years that he had chosen integrity over comfort, truth over survival. "You're insane," Sarah whispered, her voice sharp, brittle. "I am." Elias admitted softly, almost to himself, if choosing truth is insanity. Her hand trembled as she removed her wedding ring. It glinted under the fluorescent lights like a last relic of the life she thought she controlled. Without a word, she turned and walked out. No backward glance, no final appeal, just the click of heels fading into the distance. Eliza, who had observed this quietly from her position near the doorway, did not react immediately. Her eyes, dark and calculating, measured Elias with a complexity that made him uncomfortable. He had expected contempt, perhaps relief, maybe quiet satisfaction. Instead, he saw something more profound: understanding, respect, a recognition that for the first time he had aligned his actions with his conscience rather than ambition. The silence in the room stretched, punctuated only by the faint hum of the HVAC system and the distant clatter of a loose beam outside. Elias turned to the board. "We proceed," he said. "Every step of the test, every adjustment, every reinforcement follows Engineer Vance's plan exactly. She has absolute authority. My authority is secondary to hers." A low murmur rippled through the room. One partner laughed nervously, another muttered about insurance liabilities. Elias ignored them all. His attention was fixed forward, on the truth he had denied for years, and on the woman who had forced him to confront it. He could feel it in the tightness of his chest, the raw, unfamiliar sensation of fear mixed with relief, guilt tempered by clarity. For the first time, the trajectory of his life depended not on manipulation, connections, or appearances. It depended entirely on competence, on ethics, and on courage. Eliza stepped forward, helmet under her arm, tablet clutched in one hand. Her expression was unreadable, calm, precise, determined. Elias noticed the subtle lift of her brow, a silent acknowledgement that he had finally done what was necessary, even if too late for apologies. The board still argued quietly, debating the feasibility, the risks, the potential losses. But Elias paid them no mind. He had already chosen. There was no turning back. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the incomplete steel of the Aura dome. It sounded almost like a whisper, a sigh of relief, or perhaps a warning. The structure itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the test to begin. Elias exhaled again, this time more slowly, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him. For decades he had built his life on illusion, on appearances, on stolen genius. Now, for the first time, he stood on the edge of truth, staring down the consequences. And he realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. Redemption demanded risk. Not negotiation, not compromise. Risk. Everything on the line. The stress test would either save the Aura Dome or destroy everything he had built. Every partner in the room had realized the same. Sarah had realized it. Only Eliza seemed unshaken, unafraid, as if she had already accounted for every possibility in her calculations, in her instincts, in her mind. And Elias? Elias understood finally that this moment would define him more than any contract, any award, any public image ever could. He had chosen truth, but truth carried no guarantees. As Eliza stepped toward the site office to begin the first reinforcements, a sudden tremor ran through the main arch, a subtle, almost imperceptible shudder. Elias froze, his stomach twisted. This wasn't predicted in any calculation, and for the first time he realized that saving the structure and his own redemption might demand more than courage. Something or someone was still unaccounted for. The night air was heavy with anticipation. Every beam, every cable, every bolt of the Aura Dome seemed to hum in nervous tension, as if the building itself understood what was at stake. The floodlights cast long, dramatic shadows across the skeletal framework, exaggerating the height and fragility of the half-completed arch. Workers moved in careful, silent synchronization, each knowing that the slightest misstep could undo everything. Eliza stood at the base of the structure, helmet firmly secured, tablet in hand. Her eyes scanned the steel, calculating load distributions in real time. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready to adjust commands at the precise moment. The subtle tremors that had shaken the arch earlier were now expected, anticipated, accounted for. Yet the tension in her chest mirrored the weight of responsibility she carried. Elias watched from the office platform above, the city lights sprawling beyond him like a sea of stars. For 3 years, he had built his life on appearances, on manipulation, on stolen genius. Every contract, every award, every handshake that had built his empire now felt hollow. Here, in the glow of floodlights and the shadows of steel, he saw the truth, raw, uncompromising, and undeniable. The stress test began. Steel groaned and shivered as hydraulic presses and temporary supports shifted the massive arch into simulated operational stress. The sound was deafening, high-pitched, resonant, metallic, an unrelenting symphony of strain. Every joint seemed to speak, whispering threats of collapse, warning of failure. Eliza barked orders, each crisp, precise, and calculated. Secondary cables at 45 degrees, tension adjusted, crane counterweight 15% increase, check load sensors at nodes 7 and 9, immediate feedback. The workers responded like extensions of her mind. Every motion, every correction, every adjustment flowed through them seamlessly. No hesitation, no questioning, only execution. Elias held his breath. His palms were damp. He had always been in control, always the architect of outcomes. But here, for the first time, he was merely a witness. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The arch trembled violently, swaying under the artificial stress load. Sparks flew where metal and friction met. For a moment, it seemed the entire structure might fail. Then, slowly, imperceptibly, the movement eased. The tremors subsided, the steel settled, the arch held. A collective exhale rippled across the site. Workers slumped against beams, some whispering thanks to a helmeted figure they scarcely understood. Relief, raw and deep, spread through every person present. Eliza didn't move immediately. Her eyes scanned the structure, making final adjustments in her head. She touched a sensor, typed a final input, and then stepped back, allowing herself the smallest, almost imperceptible smile. Elias descended from the platform, heart pounding. Every step toward her felt like a march through the ruins of his pride, his ambition, his ego. He had built an empire on her work, and now she had saved it, without him. The board of partners filed in quietly, heads bowed, murmuring congratulations and reluctant awe. The financial risk had been enormous. The reputational damage, if failure had occurred, would have been catastrophic. Yet here they were, witnesses to a triumph that owed everything to a woman they had once dismissed as radical and worthless. Media crews had been briefed and gathered outside, the flash of cameras capturing the skeletal triumph of the night. Within hours, news outlets would hail her as the quiet savior of the Aura Dome. But here, on the steel bones of the structure, there was no audience beyond the few who had survived the test. Elias finally approached her. His voice was low, almost reverent. It held. She didn't look at him immediately. Her gaze swept the steel, then finally met his. The intensity of her eyes was disarming. Not anger, not joy, only acknowledgement. The work was done. Lives were saved. The structure survived. The stakes had been higher than money, higher than pride, higher than ambition. He extended the blueprint, the original physical copy. His hand shook slightly, uncharacteristically. Every line of stolen genius was now hers again. His own name had been erased, replaced by hers in a careful, deliberate script. Eliza Vance, AIA, true architect. Your work, he said softly, all of it. I know your worth now. She took the blueprint without a word. Her gloved fingers brushed his briefly, not in forgiveness, not in reconciliation, but in recognition. The touch was a tether to a past that could never be reclaimed, yet also a symbol of justice finally rendered. The board watched in silence, some shifting uncomfortably. Elias had signed away profits, reputation, control, everything built on her stolen work. He had chosen truth over survival, integrity over legacy. The cost to him was absolute. Eliza stepped back, holding the blueprint against her chest. The floodlights highlighted the resolve in her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Victory was hers. Elias watched her walk away from the test site, from the very arena that had been both his empire and his lie. Every step she took seemed to echo in the steel, reverberating through the $500 million structure that now stood thanks to her brilliance. And as she reached the edge of the site, pausing only for a final glance, he felt the full weight of what he had lost and what she had reclaimed. The city beyond seemed to exhale, its lights reflecting the triumph and tension of the night. Every pedestrian, every vehicle, every distant office window was oblivious to the intimate reckoning that had just unfolded above them. Elias remained at the base of the arch, looking at the city skyline, the structure, and the woman who had undone him entirely, yet restored what mattered most. He felt hollow, stripped bare of ego, stripped bare of pretense, yet strangely awake. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirred. Not hope, not love, not reconciliation, but the seed of understanding. That life was not about control or credit or empire. It was about truth, courage, and the acknowledgement of those who deserved it. Eliza disappeared into the night, blueprint in hand, leaving him alone with the ruins of his pride and the overwhelming clarity of his choices. As the first rays of dawn touched the city, Elias's phone buzzed once more. Another message. This time, it wasn't from the board, the media, or even Eliza. It read, "There's something you still need to see. Come alone." And Elias realized that the night's victory, though undeniable, might only be the beginning of the reckoning. Dawn painted the city in muted gold, the kind of light that softened edges yet exposed every detail. Eliza stood on the plaza before the completed Aura Dome, its arch gleaming in the early sun, steel and glass kissed by the first rays. The structure she had once imagined in quiet nights, sketched in hope and determination, now soared in reality, its curves and angles precise, flawless, eternal. She didn't move immediately. The air was crisp, carrying faint echoes of the city waking, car horns, footsteps, murmured greetings. But in that moment, the world had narrowed down to the building in front of her, and the blueprint of her own life she had reconstructed from fragments of betrayal and stolen dreams. Her hands rested lightly on the folded paper she had carried all night, the physical copy of the plans she had saved, revised, and ultimately defended. The signature etched in her own hand gleamed faintly. Eliza Vance, AIA, true architect. A testament not to pride, but to justice. She felt the gentle stir of wind brushing against her skin, teasing the edges of her hair. Somewhere behind her she heard a soft step. "Eliza," Elias whispered, voice low, trembling slightly, not commanding, not expecting obedience, only a name carried across distance, across years of misjudgment, betrayal, and loss. She did not turn. Her back remained straight, her shoulders squared. There was no malice, no scorn, only an immovable resolve. Some lessons were earned too late, some choices permanent, some bridges burned too deliberately to consider crossing again. He started, faltering as he searched for words that could undo what years of deception had done. She didn't listen. Not because she was cruel, but because she had no reason to. Her mission had never been personal reconciliation. It had always been truth, justice, and reclamation of what was hers. Every day she had survived after the theft. Every night she had rebuilt her confidence, had sharpened her intellect, had fortified her ambition. Everything led to this moment. And she walked forward. The plaza under her feet was empty, save for a few early commuters and the cleaning crews preparing for the day, but the silence felt monumental, almost sacred. Each step was deliberate, each movement a statement. She had survived. She had reclaimed her work. She had survived Elias Thorne's betrayal. She had survived the world that had once called her talent worthless. The Aura Dome glimmered behind her, a monument to her genius, her discipline, her courage. Media outlets would soon report on it, but the world outside didn't matter right now. Only this moment, only the quiet triumph of justice quietly delivered. She felt the weight of what she had accomplished. She had not only restored her career, but she had created a foundation in her name, ensuring future architects from underrepresented communities could rise without being crushed under the shadow of theft, bias, or doubt. Her genius, once stolen and erased, now radiated influence that could not be taken away. Elias had followed her from the plaza steps, hesitant, constrained by regret and the knowledge that all he had built rested atop her intellect. He had lost the contracts, the control, the empire he had imagined. And yet, in his loss, he had also learned, too late, that integrity mattered more than wealth, that acknowledgement mattered more than appearances. "Please," he whispered again, stepping closer, voice soft, almost pleading. She stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Her heart, though steeled by years of betrayal, felt the faintest stir of memory. Not desire, not longing, not love, but awareness. She recognized him, still flawed, still human, still capable of contrition. But the lesson had been learned, and lessons learned at the cost of destruction were irreversible. "You should go," she said softly, her voice steady, without hesitation. Not cruel, not dismissive, only final. He nodded, slowly, the weight of her words settling into him more profoundly than any boardroom confrontation, more deeply than any public failure. No argument, no plea could restore what had been taken. Redemption, he realized, came with no guarantees, and love offered no reprieve. She turned and continued walking, the blueprint held lightly but firmly against her side. Each step forward was a reclamation, not just of her work, but of herself. The sun rose fully, gilding the dome in brilliance. Commuters paused, cameras flashed in the distance, and the city held its breath, not knowing that history had been rewritten quietly, irreversibly, by a single woman's brilliance. Eliza did not glance back. She did not allow the weight of memory or temptation to pull her attention from what lay ahead. The world could wait. The past was a structure she had already rebuilt. She had achieved justice, not reconciliation, not validation from the man who had stolen her life, but she had restored what was hers, irreversibly. Her steps carried her toward a new office, new plans, and new beginnings. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the personal triumph and the silent reckoning that had just concluded atop the steel of a $500 million project. Every footfall echoed determination, every breath was hers alone. She was whole, and Elias remained behind, the ruins of his ambition at his feet, his conscience heavy, understanding at last that some costs were permanent, and some lessons came too late. Even as she walked into her future, the dome behind her, a shining testament to her skill, she knew this. Victory had no personal reward, love was not guaranteed, and some chapters were meant to close with irreversible growth, not reconciliation. The skyline shone like molten gold. The dome's reflection shimmered on the glass facades of nearby towers, a quiet monument to what truth and integrity could achieve when wielded with courage. Eliza disappeared into the morning crowd. The city continued without pause, but she carried something far more enduring than applause: her name, her work, her life. fully intact. Elias remained at the plaza, staring at the dome, at the distance where she had vanished. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This isn't over. Some truths wait beyond even genius. He stared at the screen, a chill creeping down his spine. For the first time, he realized that while her victory was complete, the world and the secrets it held might still demand reckoning beyond what anyone had anticipated.